Thanks for joining me. We're going to do a quick overview of intercepts. So an intercept is where a graph crosses an axis. And so the most common one that we see is we have a Cartesian coordinate plane, and we have an x-axis and a y-axis. And so in this case, we could have an x-intercept or a y-intercept. The x-intercept is where the graph crosses the x-axis. The y-coordinate is 0. So when you see an ordered pair for an x-intercept, you will see some number and then 0 for the y value. That is how you know you have an x-intercept. The y-intercept is where the graph crosses the y-axis. In this case, the x-coordinate is 0. So you only have a number in the y values place, and that's how you know it's a y-intercept. So whenever you have a 0, don't focus on the 0, focus on where the number is. Wherever the number is, that tells you what kind of intercept you have. So in the case of the x-intercept, the number is in the x value spot, right? In the case of the y-intercept, you have a number in the y value spot. Oftentimes people get these confused because they're focusing on the 0. So let's see how we can find some intercepts and use them to our advantage. So find the intercepts of each equation. Both of these equations that you see are linear equations, and you'll see more about linear equations in future videos. I'm going to have you draw a line connecting the two intercepts to create the graph of the line, okay? So even if you don't know right now that these are examples of linear equations, you can go ahead and draw the line because I'm telling you that they're linear equations just to get some practice. And so this is actually one technique for graphing linear equations, is to find the two intercepts. In most cases, you will have two intercepts. There are some special cases, which we'll talk about in another video, horizontal and vertical lines, that will only have one intercept. Okay, so let's get started with the intercepts. So I'm going to just go ahead and use red for x-intercepts, and I'm going to use blue for the y-intercept. To find the x-intercept, okay, we said that the y-coordinate is 0. That is always the case. So if you want to find an x-intercept, let y equal 0, right? So I'm going to take my equation that I have, negative 2x plus y equals 4, and I'm going to plug in 0 for y. And then I'm going to figure out what x is. So the plus 0, that just goes away, right? Adding 0 does not change anything. So that gives me negative 2x equals 4. Oops, now I'm going to divide by negative 2 to get the x by itself. And so I will see I have x equals negative 2. Remember, I'm finding an ordered pair here. I'm finding the x-intercept. So I need to have an x value and a y value. And there they are. So x is negative 2, y is 0. There is my ordered pair. Negative 2, so 2 to the left, and then up 0. So my red dot there on the graph on the x-axis is my x-intercept. And now I'm going to do something similar for the y-intercept. The y-intercept, x is always 0. So we're going to let x be 0 and see what we get for y. So negative 2x, so negative 2 times 0 plus y equals 4. Well, 2 times 0 is 0, so that's gone. That just leaves us y equals 4. Notice we have a y value and we have an x value. So since we have an x value and a y value, we can make an ordered pair. The x is 0, the y is 4. Okay, so now I'm going to go plot that. 0 left and right, but up 4. So the blue is my y-intercept. And now, in the directions I asked you to join these in a line. So you would just have a straight line going through those points. And that actually is a sketch of the graph associated with the equation given in number 1. So this is one technique for graphing lines, is by finding the intercepts and connecting them in a line. All right, I've got one more example for you. At the bottom, I have a link or a URL that you can write down or type in your browser. The OpenStax textbook, this is what I used for some of these examples or for some of the wording. This is my reference for this video. So if you have time and you want extra practice, I would strongly suggest visiting this website. There are a lot of practice examples that you can work through, and they have the answers to the odd problems. So you can work through the odd problems and then check your answers to make sure you're on the right track. Okay, number 2, y equals -1/2 x minus 1. I'm going to scroll back up for a second to compare the equations. Notice in equation 1, the x and the y were on the left and the constant was on the right by itself. This is called standard form. Okay, when an equation is in standard form, the intercept method of graphing is actually pretty straightforward, and I would suggest using it when you have it in that form. The second one, notice the y is by itself. This is in slope-intercept form. And I have another video covering the forms in a little bit more depth. So if you're interested, find the video associated with these different forms. Okay, but this form really is not as useful. It's not as useful to use the intercept method. There's an easier way to graph this. But just to show you how to find the intercepts in either of these cases, I'm going to go ahead and do it this way. Okay, but know that later I will show you an easier way to graph when it's in slope-intercept form. Okay, so again, let's find the x-intercept. Remember the x-intercept, we let y be 0. So I'm going to plug 0 in for y. So we have 0 equals -1/2 x minus 1. So I need to get the x by itself. So in this case, I'm going to add 1 to both sides. So that'll give me 1 is equal to -1/2 x. And then when I'm multiplying a fraction by the variable, and I want to get rid of that, I need to multiply by the reciprocal. Okay, you can either think of it as dividing by -1/2 or multiplying by a -2/1. You can multiply by the reciprocal, which when you divide fractions, if you're dividing by a -1/2, you change division to multiplication and flip it. So I'm still really dividing by -1/2, but I'm just kind of skipping some steps here. Okay, so multiply by the reciprocal. -1/2 times -2 is a +1. So that goes away. And we get x equals -2 times 1 is -2. We've solved for x, so we have the x value. Remember the y value, we assumed that y was 0 in the beginning, so now we have an x and a y value. The x value is -2 and the y value is 0. So -2, 0 is our x-intercept. All right, y-intercept. We let x be 0, right? So whatever intercept you're trying to find, the other value is 0. If you're trying to find the y-intercept, x is 0. So we're going to plug in 0 for x. So that'll be y equals -1/2 times 0 minus 1. So that's going to be 0 times anything is 0. So y equals -1. All right, we've got y value, we've got x value. So we can write an ordered pair. So 0, -1. 0, that means left and right 0, and then -1 means down 1. And then I can connect those dots to draw a graphical representation of this linear equation.